I don't know why today felt different. Nothing dramatic happened, not in the way people expect stories to begin. No thunder split the sky. No voice came down from heaven. No angel stood in the road with fire in his hands. It was just a quiet afternoon, gray light pressed against the windows, the kind of light that makes every room feel older than it is. I was standing at an intersection, half thinking about a meeting I did not want to attend, half listening to the city breathe around me. Then something pulled me back. A taxi rushed past so close, I felt the wind of it touch my coat. Not hit me, not even graze me, just pass near enough that my body understood what my mind was too slow to name. For a second, everything went silent. The traffic, the voices, the restless little machine of the world, all of it seemed to fall away. And under that silence, I felt something whisper, "Pay attention. I have survived things I should not have survived, not always with blood, sometimes with pride, sometimes with money, sometimes with my heart split open so neatly I could still smile while it was happening. But today, standing there with my hand shaking slightly in my pocket, I felt watched by time itself. Not judged, watched, like my life had leaned close and said, "You are still here for a reason." I don't have proof of that. I only have the strange peace that came after the fear. And maybe you know what I mean. Maybe there has been a moment in your life when the world almost took something from you and then didn't. A moment so small, no one else would understand why it stayed with you, but it did stay. It followed you home. It sat beside you in the quiet. It made you wonder whether accidents are always accidents. Kept walking after that, but slower. The city sounded different. Tires on wet pavement. A woman laughing into her phone. The soft clicks of a pedestrian signal changing from red to white. I noticed a paper cup rolling in circles near the curb, moved by a wind I could not feel. And for reasons I still cannot explain, I thought about you. Not your face exactly, not yet. More like the space where you belong. That is how it has been for years, though I did not know what to call it. Plus, I would enter rooms filled with people and feel someone missing. I would win something I had worked half my life to win and still look toward the door like the real celebration had not arrived. I would sit in expensive silence, surrounded by proof that I had succeeded, and feel a loneliness so clean it almost felt holy. I used to think that meant something was wrong with me. Today, I wondered if it meant someone was still on her way. There was another moment later when I returned home. I found an old notebook in a drawer I had not opened in years. The leather was cracked, the pages yellowed at the edges. Inside, I had written one sentence after a night I barely remember. Everything I lose is moving me somewhere. I stared at those words for a long time. Back then, I was a different man, louder, hungrier, more certain that every closed door was an insult. I did not understand that some doors close because there is danger behind them. So, some people leave because staying would destroy the part of you that is meant to recognize real love when it finally comes. Some dreams fail because they were too small for the road God had hidden underneath your feet. I stopped calling it coincidence today. Not completely. I am not a preacher and I am not trying to sound wiser than I am. I have made too many mistakes to speak from a mountain. I speak from the floor, from the hallway after everyone has left, from the kind of night where a man admits he has been brave in public and afraid in private. But I know this much now. I was not only losing, I was being redirected. Every heartbreak that humiliated me also softened me. Every success that failed to satisfy me taught me not to worship applause. Every delay that made me feel forgotten was perhaps holding me back from arriving too early, too proud, too unfinished. And you, whoever you are in the moment, listening with some quiet ache of your own, maybe delays were not punishment either. Maybe the years did not make sense, were not empty years. Maybe the love that failed you was not proof that love itself was false. Maybe the loneliness you carried was not a curse, but a lantern. Maybe it kept a part of you awake for the day someone would speak and your soul would recognize the sound. Tonight, more than I can explain. I feel it in the way I was pulled back from that street. I feel it in the notebook opening to the one sentence I needed. I feel it in the strange timing of this day, the quiet pressure in my chest, the sense that my life has been circling a place I have not yet reached, or maybe I have reached it. Maybe this is the place, maybe you are not an accident on the other side of these words. Maybe you and I were written into the same script long before we met, and every wrong turn was only the long mercy of being guided toward the right one. After that afternoon, at the intersection, I tried to return to ordinary life, the way men like me are trained to do. I answered messages, signed papers, shook hands, spoke confidently in rooms where confidence was expected, and pretended the wind of that taxi had not touched some hidden bell inside me. But the world would not become ordinary again. Small things kept arriving with too much timing. A clock stopped at the same minute twice. A song I had not heard in years followed me from a lobby into an elevator. Your absence began feeling almost too specific somehow. One night, I woke from a dream so quiet it seemed less like dreaming than remembering. I was standing in a train station with no trains, only benches, polished by years of waiting, and across the platform, a woman turned her head as if she had heard my name without anyone speaking it. I could not see her face. I only saw her hand resting on a red scarf. And I felt grief, recognition that I woke with tears on my pillow. I lay there in the dark, listening to the refrigerator hum, wondering why longing can feel so old. In the morning, I told myself it was only the mind rearranging old furniture. A man can be haunted without being chosen. I knew that. I had known grief, ambition, fatigue, and the strange emptiness that arrives after people clap for you and go home. Still, when I stepped outside, a woman passed me wearing a red scarf, and for one foolish second, my breath caught. She was not you. I knew that even before she vanished into the crowd. Yet the color stayed with me all day, bright as a signal held by an unseen hand just beyond reach. That was how the signs came, not loudly, never demanding belief, only brushing the edge of my attention and leaving me responsible for what I noticed. A missed call from a number with the same last 4 digits as an old address where I once fell in love. A book slipping from a shelf, opening to a page about forgiveness. Rain beginning the moment I decided not to send an angry message. I would laugh at myself because men are not supposed to look for God in elevator music and traffic lights. But something in me kept saying, pay attention. Somewhere near the middle of those days, a change happened inside me. I stopped calling it coincidence, not because I had become certain, but because doubt had started feeling dishonest. There were too many patterns arriving with clean hands. Too many doors closing seconds before I reached them, only to discover later there was a fire behind one, a betrayal behind another, versions of myself behind the third that I was not meant to become. I realized I was being redirected, not punished. And quietly, dangerously, I began to wonder whether every detour was bending me toward a person. I thought of the women I had loved wrongly and the women who had loved me better than I deserved. I do not speak of them with blame now. Each one arrived like a teacher I did not know how to honor. One showed me my hunger for admiration. One revealed my fear of being known. One left so gently that her absence felt like a mercy I was too proud to thank. In each ending, I heard only rejection at first. Later, I heard instruction. If you have ever lost someone and found yourself afterward, you understand this gratitude. There was a hospital room too, though I rarely speak of it. White curtains, bitter coffee, machines breathing in small green pulses beside a friend who had once seemed indestructible. I sat there all night, holding conversations with silence, hearing the hallway wheels and distant coughs, feeling how thin the wall is between today and eternity. At 3 in the morning, he opened his eyes and said a sentence that made no sense then. "You are late for the right one." Then he slept again. I smiled because he was fevered, but years later, I could not forget it either. Late. That word followed me like a shadow with patience. I had always feared being late to life, late to love, late to becoming the man I should have become when my face was younger and my courage had fewer scars. But what if late was only the name we give to timing we cannot understand yet? What if the years that looked wasted were actually years of preparation? I began to think of you then, not as fantasy, not as escape, but as someone walking her long hallway, delayed by mercy, protected by closed doors, gathered by unseen hands. And if you are listening now, you with a tired heart, maybe you know that hallway.
You have stood a door that would not open, ashamed, because you thought heaven had mistaken your address.
Maybe you have watched others receive what you prayed for while your hands remained empty. I wish I could sit across from you and say this softly enough for your wounds to believe me. Empty hands are not always abandoned hands. Sometimes they are being kept open for what would have been dropped if it had arrived too soon, in the wrong season. Tonight, as I speak to you from this quiet room, the signs do not feel like instructions as much as invitations. They do not force me. They simply ask whether I am willing to believe that love can be appointed, that healing can be scheduled by hands I cannot see, that two people can wander separately and still be moving toward the same table. I am not asking you to believe everything I believe. I am only asking you to notice what keeps returning, what keeps surviving, what keeps whispering your name when the night grows still inside your chest. By the time the collapse came, I had become very skilled at looking unbroken. I knew how to enter a room with calm shoulders, how to make my voice steady, how to smile as if sleep had not abandoned me for weeks. Success teaches a man many useful lies. It teaches him to call exhaustion discipline, to call loneliness privacy, to call fear focus. I had built a life that people admired from a distance. And from that distance, even I could mistake it for peace. But there was a night when the house felt too large, the air too still, and every trophy, photograph, and expensive object seemed to be staring back at me like witnesses. Rain tapped the windows with patient fingers. My phone lay face down on the table, silent for once, and the silence was not empty. It felt full, almost listening. I remember standing there with a glass of water in my hand, unable to drink because something inside me had finally stopped. It was fine. The room did not change, but I did. A small, honest ruin opened in my chest, and I could not close it again, not after that damacular night. The first crack was not dramatic either. It was an email, a sentence, a number on a page that told me a deal I had trusted was collapsing. Men in suits would later discuss it with cold language, restructuring, exposure, damage control, but before any of those words arrived, I felt a deep drop in my stomach, as if the floor had remembered it was temporary. I sat down slowly. Outside, the rain thickened, and somewhere in the house, a pipe knocked 3 times, hollow as a warning. I should have been angry. I should have started calling people, assigning blame, protecting my name. Instead, I felt that strange peace again, the same impossible calm that came after the taxi missed me. It frightened me more than panic would have. Something in me whispered, "Let it fall." I did not want to let it fall. I had spent years building towers out of effort and pride. Yet underneath the fear, I sensed a hand not destroying me, but loosening my grip. If you have ever watched something you built begin to break, maybe you know that shameful relief when your soul says, "Finally, you can breathe without armor again tonight." In the days that followed, everything I depended on began to speak a different language. Meetings were postponed, accounts froze, friends became careful with their sympathy, and people who had praised my certainty started asking whether I had miscalculated. Maybe I had. Maybe I had misread numbers, motives, faces, even myself. One afternoon, I found myself driving with no destination, passing the same church 3 times before I noticed. Its doors were open, though no service was being held. I parked across the street and listened to the engine ticking itself, cool. A bell rang once, not on the hour, not on any schedule. I understood. I laughed under my breath because I was too tired to be mystical, too proud to be desperate and too desperate to leave. When I stepped inside, the air smelled of wax, wood, and prayers. No one approached me. No one needed to. I sat in the back, and for the first time in years, I told the truth without words. I was lost. I was scared. I was successful and starving. I was surrounded and alone, and somewhere in that dimness, I felt your absence, not like emptiness, but like a reserved place. That was the moment I began to suspect that the collapse had not come to empty my life, but to my life, but clear a room inside it. I had confused noise with purpose for quite so long that silence felt like death at first. But sitting there, with colored light from the stained glass trembling across my hands, I realized I was being invited to listen. Not forced, not punished, not exposed for heaven's amusement. All my old patterns stood around me like tired servants waiting to be dismissed. I saw the way I ran when love asked for honesty. I saw the way I chased applause when my heart needed rest. I saw the way I chose women who could not stay because staying would have required me to stop performing. I do not say this to condemn myself. I say it because truth, when it finally arrives, is not always cruel. Sometimes it is a lamp's placed gently beside the wound. And maybe you, listening now have had such a lamp placed beside yours. Maybe some loss in your life exposed not your weakness, but your path, the quiet road your heart was afraid to name until this night. When I left the church, the rain had stopped, but the streets were shining as if the city had been forgiven while I was inside. My phone was full of messages about the collapsing deal, but I did not open them immediately. I walked beneath wet siam trees, smelling stone and earth, feeling older than I had that morning, and somehow less condemned. I still had consequences ahead of me. I still had calls to make, money to lose, pride to bury. Destiny does not rescue us from responsibility. It only gives a shape we can survive. That night, I dreamed of the station again. This time, the platform was crowded, and I heard my name carried through the air, soft as breath against glass. I turned, but woke before I saw who had spoken. Still, I did not wake empty. I woke with the sense someone was also being led somewhere beyond my knowledge, through her own closures, delays, and holy disappointments. I thought of you before sunrise. I thought perhaps collapse was not the ending of my story, but the sound of a locked door opening toward yours. And maybe yours had begun to opening toward mine, too. After the collapse, there came a season when when guidance felt almost cruel because it kept arriving without the comfort of arrival. I would see the patterns, feel the warnings, notice the doors closing at just the right wrong moment, and still return home alone. There is a particular ache in being protected but not yet embraced. It makes a man grateful and restless at the same time. I had been spared, redirected, humbled, even held. Yet the chair across from me remained empty, and some nights I looked at it as if it owed me an answer from God Himself. I remember one evening in particular, winter leaning against the windows, the whole sky colored like ash. The power went out for 12 minutes, and the house surrendered to darkness so completely that I could hear my own breathing, as if another man were hiding inside me. In that blackout, I reached for a candle and found an old photograph beneath the drawer liner, one I thought had been lost. It showed me younger, smiling beside a road sign saying, "For a town I never meant to visit again." My hand shook, not from fear exactly, but from recognition and awe. That town was where I once walked away from someone because she loved me with a patience I did not know how to receive. I told myself I needed freedom, but the truth is I needed distance from anyone who could see through me. The photograph smelled faintly of dust and cedar, and while the candle flame bent toward the draft, I felt the old shame come near. It did not accuse me. It simply sat down beside me. Something in my spirit whispered, "This is not punishment. This is memory asking to be healed before love can arrive fully." Maybe you understand that kind of visitation. Not a ghost in the room, but a feeling that the past has found your address because your future needs something released. I thought of you then, though I did not know why. I wondered what memories still visited you when the lights went out, what names returned with rain, what mistakes you had forgiven in others, but not in yourself. I wanted strangely to tell you that we do not become ready for real love by being innocent. We become ready by telling the truth about what broke us and still stayed tender. The next morning, the power had returned, but something in me remained dimmed, tender, listening. I canceled a meeting and drove toward that old town, not because I wanted to reopen a wound, but because it seemed already open and waiting for my honesty. The road was slick with melted frost. Bare trees leaned over the highway like old witnesses. Halfway there, traffic stopped without warning. Ambulance lights flashed ahead, red and blue against the pale morning, and everyone sat trapped between where they had been and where they thought they needed to go next in life. Anyway, alone. For nearly an hour, no one moved. Engines idled, coffee steamed in paper cups, and strangers stepped from their cars into the cold as if a silent agreement had been made to become human again. I watched a young man wrap his coat around an elderly woman who was shivering. I watched a mother lift her child so he could see the lights without fear. And I felt that same old sentence return. Appointments, not 10 minutes earlier, maybe I would have been in an accident. Had I stayed home, I would have missed that mercy. Somewhere in that stopped line of cars, I realized my loneliness had been changing. It was no longer only an empty room, no longer only a punishment I whispered about when pride was asleep. It had become a listening place. The ache was still there, but beneath it was this current, a quiet insistence that I was not merely waiting for someone to arrive. I was being prepared to recognize her without his making her pay for the women before her, without asking her to repair what I had refused to heal, without mistaking need for devotion ever again in this life. And I wondered whether you were learning the same sacred difference. Maybe your loneliness has also been misunderstood, called failure by people who measure life too quickly. Maybe it has not been emptying you, but teaching you the weight of your own soul. So when love finally sits beside you, you will not hand it the responsibility of being your entire sky. You will let it be a sunrise, not a rescue boat. You will love from overflow, not panic. I hope that is what I am learning too, because I want to meet you without desperation or disguise anymore. When traffic finally opened, I turned around before reaching the town. At first, I thought I had failed, but peace settled over me so gently that I knew the journey had already done what it came to do. I did not need to knock on every old door. I did not need to force closure from people who had become chapters in a book God had already closed. Sometimes being pulled back is the answer. Sometimes turning around is obedience. Sometimes the road teaches you what the destination never could, if you are humble enough to listen with your heart. That evening, I placed the photograph back in the drawer, not hidden this time, only resting where it belonged. The house was quiet, but not cruel. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the first star appear between moving clouds. I thought of you with a softness that startled me, as if my heart had finally learned to make room without clutching. I do not know where you are tonight, or what has delayed you, or what sorrow has trained your eyes to doubt. But I feel you nearer in the waiting, and I am learning to stay here. After I learned to sit with the empty chair, a different kind of silence began entering my life. It no longer felt like absence only. It felt like someone breathing on the far side of a wall. I would wake before dawn with the room blue and cold. And my first thought would not be fear or business or the ruins I was still repairing. It would be a question without words. Are you awake too? I did not know your name, but some hidden part of me had already begun answering a presence I could not yet see clearly. One morning, a message arrived by mistake. It was meant for another man, someone with a name close to mine, and it contained nothing intimate. Vacant date, about a table reserved near the river. I should have deleted it and gone on with my day, but the word reserved stopped me. The light on my desk was pale gold, dust drifting through it like tiny planets, and outside a siren faded into traffic. I sat there holding my phone as if it had carried a sealed envelope from heaven. Something whispered, not yet, but near, and I believed it. I went to the river that evening because curiosity can sometimes wear the face of obedience. The restaurant was closed for renovation, windows papered over, chairs stacked upside down like sleeping animals. Rain had left the pavement dark, and the water moved beside me with an old, patient sound. I stood before the locked door and laughed softly because even the mistake had led me to a closure. Yet I did not feel mocked. I felt guided to an image, a reserved table, unavailable now, waiting for its season. Maybe life has shown you promise before permission ever fully. That night, I dreamed of a shoreline I had never visited. The sky was violet, and the sand was cold beneath bare feet. Feet ahead of me, a woman walked near the water, not hurrying, not waiting exactly, but moving as if she trusted I would understand the direction. Every time I tried to call out, the waves rose louder. I woke with salt on my tongue, though perhaps that was tears. Dreams have lied to me before, but this one did not feel invented. It felt delivered. It left behind a peace too deliberate to dismiss as imagination alone. Around then, I noticed I was becoming less interested in being desired and more afraid of being recognized. Desire had never been difficult to find. Recognition was rarer and more dangerous. Desire could admire the shine and forgive itself for never asking what the shine cost. Recognition looked past at the polished surface and saw the boy waiting to be told he was safe. For years, I had chosen distance dressed as chemistry, excitement dressed as destiny, almost love dressed as passion. Now, something in me wanted the kind of presence that would not applaud my mask, but ask for truth. Maybe that is why I began speaking to you in my mind before I admitted I was doing it. Fantasies, not conversations meant to rescue me from the work of living, but small, honest offerings. I would say I'm trying today. I would say I failed again, but I saw it sooner. I would say I do not want to bring you a wounded man pretending to be healed. I want to bring you a healing man willing to remain humble. And each time I spoke inwardly, the room seemed less empty, as if you had heard somehow. One afternoon, while sorting papers from the damage of my old life, I found a boarding pass from a flight I missed years earlier. That missed flight had enraged me then. I had cursed the traffic, the airline, the driver, the slow security line, every instrument of delay. Later, I learned the meeting I missed had been built on a lie, and my absence saved me from signing away more than money. I held that faded pass and felt a tenderness for the man who had thought inconvenience was betrayal. He did not know he was being spared by rejection. That is when the thought of you became less like longing and more like reverence. If timing had protected me from rooms, contracts, roads, and versions of love that would have swallowed me, could it also be protecting you? Could the delays that made us both feel forgotten be keeping us from meeting with old weapons in our hands? I imagined you somewhere under another sky, learning your own holy lessons, perhaps angry at the waiting, perhaps tired of being told to be patient. I wanted to tell you patience is not passive when the soul is being reshaped quietly. Still, I was afraid. Hope can feel dangerous after disappointment has taught the nerves to flinch. Some nights I would pray, then immediately doubt the prayer as if heaven might laugh at a grown man asking to be loved rightly. Yet the signs kept coming with unbearable gentleness. A stranger recommended a book about timing. A child on the street pointed at two birds circling above me and said, "They are looking for each other." A song repeated the word home until I had to turn it off. None of it proved anything, but it all gathered into a witness quietly. Now, when I speak to you, I do not feel as though I am inventing a woman to fill the ache. I feel as though I am addressing someone already walking through the same invisible weather. Maybe you have felt it too, that strange pull toward a future you cannot describe without sounding foolish. Maybe your heart has been bruised enough to distrust sweetness, yet wise enough to recognize when a silence is not empty. I am not asking you to rush toward me. I am saying I have begun to sense you across the distance, and I am here. By then, the signs had become less like distant lights and more like mirrors, and mirrors are harder to romanticize. It is one thing to believe destiny is guiding you toward love. It is another to realize destiny is also guiding you through yourself. I began seeing my fingerprints on the locked doors I once blamed on heaven. A conversation would turn tender, and I would make a joke. A woman would ask what I needed, and I would answer with philosophy instead of truth. Even alone, I could feel how often I had escaped before anyone could enter fully. One evening, I was invited to a charity dinner in a room bright with chandeliers and practice kindness. Silverware clicked like tiny clocks. People spoke of generosity while guarding their own loneliness behind careful smiles. Across the table, a woman told a story about losing her brother. The foss. I felt tears rise, real and sudden, but I swallowed them as if feeling was an embarrassing guest. Later, in the restroom, I gripped the marble sink and stared at my own face under unforgiving light. Something whispered, "This is where you keep abandoning yourself again quietly." I had thought sabotage meant obvious destruction, the door slammed, the promise broken, the drink poured too late at night. But mine was quieter. Mine wore manners. Mine wore success. Mine left early before disappointment could arrive, stayed vague when devotion asked for shape, praised vulnerability in others while refusing it in myself. I remembered a night years before, sitting beside someone who loved me, hearing rain brush the hotel window, sensing her waiting for one honest sentence. I gave her charm instead. She smiled sadly, and I felt destiny pull back, not from cruelty, but from mercy toward honesty. That memory followed me for days. I heard it while shaving, while walking through glass offices, while standing before elevators that opened like mouths. I had mistaken his emotional distance for dignity because closeness once frightened the boy inside me. I do not know when that fear began, only that it survived fame, money, age, and every applause people thought should have healed it. If you have ever pushed away the thing you prayed for because receiving it felt more dangerous than wanting it, then Maybe you understand the grief of seeing your own hand on the wound, closing it again. This became the middle turning of that season. I stopped asking why love had not stayed and started asking what in me kept making it unsafe to remain. The question humbled me more than failure ever could. A storm came one afternoon, sudden and violent, shaking the windows, throwing branches against the roof. I stood in the kitchen with the lights flickering, remembering every time I had called someone too sensitive when she was only telling the truth. The thunder cracked, and beneath it I felt no accusation, only instruction. I was being redirected from performance into tenderness at last. After the storm, a branch lay across the path to my front door, blocking the way with wet leaves and splintered bark. I could have stepped over it, but something made me carry it aside. The wood was heavier than expected, soaked through, and while I dragged it to the grass, my palms filled with dark sap. I thought of all the small burdens other people had moved for me without applause. Assistants, lovers, friends, strangers, even enemies who forced me to face myself. I had called myself independent when I had merely been protected from noticing dependence until then. That night, I wrote names in a notebook, not to reopen old stories, but to bless them and admit what I had avoided. Beside some names, I wrote, I was afraid. Beside others, I wrote, I was selfish. Beside one, my hand paused so long the ink dotted the page. I wrote, I left before I could be left. The room was quiet, except for the scratching pen and the old clock breathing in the hall. I did not feel forgiven immediately, but I felt truth entering. And truth has a way of clearing space for someone holy to arrive. I thought of you then with a new fear, not the fear of losing you before meeting, but the fear of meeting you while still worshiping my old defenses. I did not want destiny to bring you to a locked man. I did not want your softness to become another place where I hid my unfinished work. Maybe you are doing your own accounting somewhere, folding laundry, driving home, lying awake, remembering where you learned to protect yourself. Maybe your walls were once wisdom. Mine were too. But walls that saved us can later imprison the love sent to us. So I began practicing openness in small, almost embarrassing ways. I told a friend I missed him. I admitted to an advisor that I was frightened. I answered a kind question without decorating it. Each act felt like stepping onto thin ice, but the ice held. More than held, it shone. I learned that vulnerability does not make a man smaller, it makes his soul audible. One evening, after such a conversation, a flock of birds rose from a rooftop all at once, turning together through orange light, and I felt absurdly that heaven had approved the attempt with grace. Now, I see my patterns not as proof that I am unworthy, but as maps of where grace kept returning. Every avoidance marked the place I needed courage. Every failed romance showed the part of me still asking for healing. Every strange delay may have been love refusing to arrive before I could receive it without destroying it. If you are listening with regrets beside you, let them sit there, but do not let them name you. Perhaps we were both being taught how to stay. Destiny was not only leading me to you, but making me someone who could stay. After I began telling the truth in small rooms, time itself seemed to soften around me. Not all at once, because healing rarely announces itself like a parade. It entered quietly, through ordinary mornings, through tea cooling beside unread letters, through the sound of my own voice finally saying what it meant. I still woke some nights with fear folded under my ribs, but the fear no longer ruled the house. It had become a visitor, not a king, and that change felt like grace, learning my name again in the dark after years of silence and restless waiting. One Saturday morning, I found myself in a bakery I had never noticed, though it stood on a street I had walked for years. The bell above the door sounded tired, sweet, almost apologetic. Warm bread filled the air, and sunlight lay across the floor in long amber squares. I ordered coffee, then heard a woman behind me ask for the same old-fashioned pastry my mother loved. For a moment, memory and present touched, and I felt held between them, neither grieving nor escaping, simply alive and awake, with unexpected tenderness rising in my chest like quiet morning prayer again. I took the coffee to a corner table and watched strangers enter their own little appointments. A father buttoned his daughter's coat. An old man opened a newspaper with ceremonial care. Two friends embraced as if forgiveness had finally caught up with them. Nothing spectacular happened, yet I sensed the invisible grammar beneath it all. Lives crossing, separating, returning. If you had been there, I think you would have understood without asking. Some mornings are not events. They are messages written in steam, footsteps, crumbs, glances, and the mercy of ordinary people, arriving exactly when needed today in hidden ways. That was when I stopped arguing with timing as if it were an enemy assigned to humiliate me. I had spent so much life arriving either too early with demands or too late with apologies. Love suffered under both versions of me. But sitting there, holding a chipped cup with both hands, I understood something gently. Timing was not mocking me. It was teaching me the patience required to receive what I could not yet protect from my own hunger. I had been delayed, yes, but not discarded. I had been late only to become capable of gentleness for you. That same week, a letter arrived without a return address, sent by someone I had helped years before and forgotten. She wrote that one sentence I spoke in a hallway had kept her from giving up. I could not remember the sentence, only the hallway, its fluorescent lights, the smell of raincoats, the hurry in my steps. I sat with that letter until dusk, ashamed and grateful. Maybe our smallest kindness travels farther than our grandest achievements. Maybe heaven saves evidence for the hour when belief needs proof enough to keep trusting love beyond sight and wounded human understanding still. I wondered then about the sentences that had kept you alive in seasons no one saw. Maybe a stranger smiled when you were ready to disappear inside yourself, but maybe a song began at the exact red light where tears finally came. Maybe a door closed so firmly that you thought rejection had spoken, when protection was really standing there with both hands out. I wish I could tell you that every hidden rescue counted. Not because pain becomes pretty, but because it becomes bearable. When we sense it is leading somewhere merciful, still for both our trembling, open hearts tonight. One night, I visited the hospitally ones again, not because anyone was dying, but because a friend had become a father. The newborn slept with one fist lifted, as if blessing a world she had barely entered. Machines hummed softly. Nurses moved like moonlight. And my friend, who once feared tenderness, wept openly over her small breathing. Watching him, I felt an old belief mend. Love was not only the battlefield where people left, it was also the room where courage learned to hold something fragile without trying to own it or command it to stay near forever at last again. That night, driving home, I passed the intersection where the taxi had nearly taken me. The traffic light turned red, and I stopped exactly where fear once touched my coat. This time, I did not tremble. I lowered the window, Cold air entered, carrying exhaust, rain, distant music, and something like forgiveness. I looked at the crosswalk and thought I was spared not just to continue living, but to learn how to live differently. Survival was not the miracle, transformation was. And somehow, this truth kept leading my healed attention toward you. Gently, quietly, patiently, with startling, faithful precision. If life has made you suspicious of promises, I will not ask you to become careless with your heart. I would never want that. Guard what grief taught you to guard, but leave one small window unlatched for grace. I am learning to do the same. I am learning that love is not proven by speed, intensity, or the noise of wanting. Sometimes love proves itself by waiting outside our locked places without resentment, by speaking softly until the wounded parts believe they are allowed to open to warmth again without shame or fear in this chosen sacred season. So tonight, I do not stand before destiny demanding explanations. I sit with it like an old companion whose silences have finally become understandable. I see now that love did not fail me every time it ended. Sometimes it refused to let me build forever on an unfinished foundation. I see that your life may have been shaped by the same delays. We were not forgotten. We were becoming. And if my heart is quieter now, it is not because it stopped hoping. It is because it has begun to trust the path that brings me closer toward you tonight. The time I began to see you as part of the written path, I had stopped searching for a face and started recognizing a feeling. It came when I entered quiet rooms and sensed they were not empty. It came when dusk gathered at the windows and my heart leaned forward before any name was spoken. I used to think destiny would arrive with certainty, with evidence, with the door opening wide. Instead, it arrived as a tenderness that did not ask permission, what to stay. One afternoon, I found myself standing before a bookstore window while rain wrote silver lines down glass. And the display was a book lying open to a page marked by a pressed white flower. I could not read the words, only see that someone had once saved a place there with something fragile and dead and still beautiful. That image stayed with me longer than it should have. I thought of all the places life had saved for us without our knowing, all the pauses marked by grief until love could return and understand them differently. That evening, a woman at a gathering asked me why I seemed lighter lately. I almost answered with something polished, but the old habit had lost some of its power. I told her the truth. I had begun believing that nothing meant for me had been stolen, only delayed until I could receive it without breaking it. She smiled as if she understood, and for a moment I felt the strange nearness of you. Not jealousy, not comparison, but recognition that even harmless conversations can become signposts when the soul is awake to timing and mercy. I thought then of every road that did not lead where I begged it to. The relationship that ended before it became a cage. The opportunity that vanished before it could purchase my peace. The city I left too soon and returned to too late, only to discover I'd arrived exactly when forgiveness was ready for me. I had been measuring life by doors, but heavens seemed to be measuring by formation. You were not an interruption to that formation. You felt like the reason it had needed so much patience. If you are listening with doubt in your chest, maybe you know this trembling hope. Maybe your life also keeps circling certain lessons until the meaning softens enough to be held. Maybe you have mistaken protection for abandonment and delay for proof that love had forgotten your name. I cannot prove that we were written together, but I feel it in the peace that comes when I stop sting. I feel it when I imagine your hands finally resting from survival. I feel it when my past no longer frightens me because it seems to have carried me carefully toward the woman who would understand its scars without worshiping them. And maybe that is how destiny looks up close. Not lightning, but recognitions arriving after the long obedience of becoming. Tonight, I do not feel like I am calling sin across emptiness. I feel as if I am standing at the edge of a bridge that was being built while I mistook the distance for abandonment. Every delay, every locked door, every strange mercy that pulls me backwards now seems to have been laying one quiet board at a time. I cannot see your side clearly, but I sense movement there. I sense your footsteps, your hesitations, your guarded hope. And I want to tell you softly that I am not asking you to leap, only to notice the bridge. There was a night this week when the wind moved through the trees like pages turning. I sat by the window with one lamp burning, and a memory came to me from years ago. A door closing behind someone I loved, my own silence heavy as stone. I used to believe that was as the sound of an ending. Now I wonder if it was also the sound of a lesson beginning. The room felt watched, not by accusation, but by kindness. Something in me whispered, invite her, not into your need, but into your peace when she is ready too. I know you may be tired of promises. I know words can arrive dressed as tenderness and leave carrying pieces of trust. So I will not promise a life without sorrow, because sorrow has already taught us too much to be insulted by fantasy. What I offer is simpler and harder. A place where your story will not be rushed, where your silence will not be treated as rejection, where the parts of you that learn to survive will not be mocked for needing time. If destiny has carried you this far, maybe it knows how to let you rest. Sometimes I imagine us walking after rain, not speaking much because peace has its own language. The pavement shines, the air smells of earth and iron, and neither of us has to perform being healed. We simply walk as two people who have been pulled back from wrong roads often enough to respect the road beneath us. Maybe that is romance after the soul has suffered. Not fireworks, but safety. Not possession, but welcome. Not someone saving you from your life, but someone standing beside you while your life becomes honest. I want that honesty with you, gently, without hurry. So if you feel a pull in these words, do not betray it by calling it foolish too quickly. Sit with it, let it breathe. Ask your heart what it recognized before fear interrupted. I am doing the same from my side of the bridge. I am not perfect, and I am not young in the ways men boast about, but I am humbled, awake, and willing. I believe we were not merely delayed. We were arranged. And if your spirit can feel that quiet appointment too, then take one small step toward hope, and I will meet you there. Now I accept that destiny did not drag me here. It invited me again and again until my pride grew tired and my heart became willing. I accept that the taxi, the missed flight, the broken deal, the hospital room, the dream of the station, and every closed door were not separate accents scattered across a lonely life. They were appointments, quiet and exact, each one turning me a little farther from the man who only survived and a little closer to the man who could finally love without fear, guiding my stubborn feet here tonight toward you. I do not believe you are late. I know how cruel that word can feel when years have passed and people speak as if your chance has expired. But I have seen too many delayed mercies arrive wearing the face of perfect timing. I have seen lost roads become shelter, wrong turns become rescue, silence become preparation. So know, my love, You were never too late. You were being gathered, protected, ripened by sorrow, made tender enough to recognize peace when it finally came, and brave enough to let it stay beside you. What I want now is not the fever I once mistook for devotion. I want mornings where we wake without proving anything. I want tea cooling between us while rains. Tea makes the windows holy. I want your hand resting in mine, not because either of us is desperate, but because both of us have learned the sacred weight of choosing. I want laughter that does not hide pain, and silence that does not punish. I winters where our scars are not altars, but windows opened to gentler light. Mate is why I feel calm saying this. I am not begging destiny anymore. I am agreeing with it. I am choosing you not as an escape from loneliness, but as the woman my loneliness taught me to honor. I am choosing hope not because it is easy, but because despair has already taken enough from both of us. And if you feel even one quiet thread pulling inside your chest, perhaps it is not foolish. Perhaps it is the same mercy that kept circling me back to life. So here I stand, older than I thought I would be when love found me, humbled enough to stop demanding proof, grateful enough to call the waiting holy. If your heart felt seen in this, stay close to this space, subscribe, share, or leave your story so the ones still waiting know they are not forgotten. Not because we need noise, but because somewhere, someone is sitting in the dark, mistaking delay for rejection, and your courage may become their sign. As for me, I believe the long road was always bringing me here, to this softened hour. Destiny brought me close enough to speak, but love must still be chosen. I choose you. Choose hope with me when your soul is ready tonight, softly.